Hello, I'm Amanda Walker, and welcome to Inside America, the show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In today's episode, 4 years after its chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the US military is once again at the center of both global conflict and domestic debate. Donald Trump is accused of using the military for his own personal gratification after his deployment of National Guard troops here in Washington, D.C.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
While globally, the president's so-called America First strategy has left allies wondering if the U.S. still has their backs. Coming up, we test the mood here in D.C., still in its federal takeover.
It's an inherent psychological thing. If you're out policing me, I'm going to have less trust in you. The reason that our public trust our military is they are out abroad deploying and engaging and neutralizing the enemies of America. We're not the enemies of America, so why are you on America's soil policing America's citizens?
And I ask a former senior Obama official if America can still claim its moral high ground. You mentioned bad guys, dictators, who very often Trump has expressed an affinity with. Can we make the assumption anymore that if there is a future war, America will be on the right side of it? So, in President Trump's second term, the vision for US military power looks very different to what has gone before. It's more tech-driven, less troop-heavy, and increasingly focused inward. From AI warfare and drone fleets to unprecedented National Guard deployments in US cities, the question isn't just what the military fights, but what the military is in 2025. Donald Trump says the federal takeover here in Washington, D.C. had to happen because of what he calls a crime emergency. But as we found out, plenty of people beg to differ. America's National Guard, armed and ready. Their mission? To tackle what President Trump calls bedlam on the streets of the nation's capital. Tourists have been witnessing an unprecedented chapter of US history. How unusual is this deployment in a time that isn't a crisis?
Yeah, it's unusual. There's two things that make it unusual. The first is that the government has not asked for it. So the government of the District of Columbia. Normally, the state government will ask for federalized National Guard as an assist if there's a time of crisis, and it doesn't have to be a security crisis. So that's unusual. The other thing that's unusual is the mission is not to enforce specific laws like integrating Little Rock High School or to protect federal buildings against attack like we saw in Los Angeles with the immigration and customs enforcement. Rather, it's more of a generic anti-crime thing. We don't see that very often.
Troops have been positioned across the city, including one of the busiest transport hubs, Union Station. Do you think Donald Trump thinks this is going well?
Absolutely. I mean, the overall crime rates are going well. The people that talk professionally about politics uniformly say this is a stunt, this is ineffective, it won't work. But you know, the violent crime rates have fallen down, and I think that if you talk to people who live in the city, or if you just look around here, but I think it's actually a positive thing. It's probably not a sustainable thing, but I think it's a positive thing.
Right up the street, there's
Kit Wheatley has lived in Capitol Hill for over 4 decades. What went into your head when you heard Donald Trump say the National Guard was coming to your neighborhood?
Well, it's just one more lie. He's just playing to his people, trying to make them think that there is an emergency that doesn't exist. He's done this again and again and again. He lies as he talks.
What's been your experience on the ground over the past couple of weeks, just seeing National Guard around? What have they been doing? What's the atmosphere been like?
Well, I haven't actually seen very many, but I was at the Eastern Market Metro, which is just about maybe a mile that way, a couple of days ago. 5 National Guard troops, 3 Metropolitan Police Department people. What were they doing? Nothing. Nothing. I sat and talked to a couple of them for a few minutes. They're from Mississippi, National Guard from Mississippi. I said, there's a lot of crime in Mississippi, isn't there? And the guy said, yeah, Jackson, man. And I said, so, it seems like this isn't really, they've got a lot more crime than we do. It seems like it's not really about crime, right? And he said, yeah, maybe.
There's a shared fear that what's happening here in Washington, D.C. could be a dry run.
If you start with troops here unarmed, and then a week or two later you arm them, and then a week or two later you put them in other cities, it's like a slow roll into authoritarianism. And that's what we could be seeing happening.
Donald Trump would say that this is designed to make people feel safer.
Safer from who, though? As far as I know, D.C. is a safe place. But for me and a lot of my people, D.C. is safe for us. So with him bringing all these military people, police and everything, it's scaring people and it's going to make people act how they don't want to act. So
it could inflame.
Yeah, it's going to get very, very bad.
Those fears are not unfounded. Newsweek now reports that as many as 1,700 National Guard troops could soon be deployed across 19 states, most led by Republicans, to assist ICE in immigration enforcement.
Prepare for the winter.
A group of US veterans have started a sit-in at Union Station, protesting what they call the military occupation of the city.
We've actually engaged with the Guard, and we've talked to them respectfully, like me, and like we have a whole bunch of veterans here. We provide resources. We say, hey, you don't have to comply with these orders, and we only mention that to them like once. Otherwise, we engage with them, talk to them like human beings. We get to know them. They're kids that want to go home to their families. They have no interest in being here. And we have them, Trump has them over in McPherson Square doing mulch, gardening, picking up trash.
Analysts say one National Guard member costs the federal government about $530 per day. With 2,000 troops in D.C., the bill could climb past $1 million each day. So how is this entry of the US military into domestic civilian life affecting its image? Russell Ellis served 13 years in the Army. His deployments included Iraq and Afghanistan.
The overwhelming majority of people to see, they don't like this National Guard presence. Who would? There's nothing happening that would require a National Guard presence. The reason us, the veterans, showed up was to protest the military occupation of America's streets. We don't agree with it. It's an inherent psychological thing. If you're out policing me, I'm going to have less trust in you. The reason that our public trust our military is they are out abroad deploying and engaging and neutralizing the enemies of America. We're not the enemies of America, so why are you on American soil policing American citizens? And what you're going to see happen over the long term is this is going to cause enlistment rates to drop. Now, I understand Donald Trump's making these bolstery claims that enlistment's up, but he also said crime's up in D.C., and that's not true. I can tell you 33,000 lies Trump has said. I mean, if this was Vegas and you were betting anything, whatever Trump says, bet that's probably not true.
Now, that veterans warning points to something bigger. At home, the National Guard presence is raising questions of trust, cost, and even recruitment. But abroad, the symbolism matters too. Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Obama, now a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security, joined me to talk about what Trump's push to rebrand the Pentagon as the Department of War says about the Trump doctrine.
The reason it was called the Department of Defense was because it sent a signal to the rest of the world that we were not going to be an aggressive nation. We had just won World War II, and so we had not been in a position like that as a country. And so the world didn't know necessarily what to make of a United States that suddenly was this superpower, a nuclear superpower. So changing the name back to the Department of War certainly is going to have people wonder, so what's behind this?
Yeah, is that a tactic in itself? Because you've got Donald Trump on the one hand saying, I'm the peacemaker, I'm going to end wars, and then he wants to call it the Department of War. It's very contradictory. Is this a strategy to keep the world guessing?
I think he likes having everyone wondering what's going on. He likes to have everyone on their back foot. He doesn't like to be predictable. That is something that he feels will show weakness. So calling it the Department of War is something that is going to also have domestic implications with the libs. You know, this is something that he knows is going to cause left-wing Democrats to run to the op-ed pages and say, "How could he do this?" And he loves to see this. He loves to get a rise in the left. Even though this is not a good look for him with the Nobel Prize Committee in Norway, they're going, "Hey, you call yourself a man of peace, and how does this work?"
And from within your contacts that you still maintain within the military world, how do people feel about Pete Hegseth being Defense Secretary, as he is now in the job, performing that role? How's it playing out from what you're hearing from inside?
Well, from what I'm hearing from the inside, on the military side, and on the civilians too, they're being very cautious. They don't want to get themselves in the firing line for suggesting a policy or an approach or doing something or another that will bring them into the crosshairs of, you know, a MAGA person who's going to have them fired. And so you have a caution in the intelligence community too, particularly, and I've heard quite a bit about that, where there's concern about providing an assessment that might not be what the bosses want to see.
Do you think globally there's any particular hotspot we should be watching? What do you make of Venezuela, for example, with this naval positioning, anti-cartel mission, but also seen as a kind of gunboat diplomacy? Is that concerning you? What kind of impact has that naval posturing, positioning had in the past?
This is something that is very different. And it's something that bears watching. We've heard Trump talk about bombing cartels and this type of thing. He's bombed other countries. Iran is an example, not a good one, but it's an example. He's not shy about using military means. So I think this is something we're going to have to really watch and see what he does. He could cross a line here in terms of how we conduct ourselves, and that will be something else that the American people need to see and understand, that he's taking us to an era that is long ago forgotten, where we would use the Navy in this way against another country for other reasons. Those days are long gone. This isn't a good look for the United States. And so we're going to have to watch and see and understand that if something happens where a line is crossed and we begin to bomb civilian sites in Venezuela, that this is a norm and this is something that is unacceptable. And that's going to have to add to that voter's mindset when that voter walks into the voting booth for the midterms and for the next presidential election.
Afghanistan, 4 years since the US withdrawal. Have the right lessons been learned?
Whew. Boy, you know, I was involved with that as far as the allies were concerned, and I still haven't processed all that happened there. And it just breaks my heart to think about all the work and the hopes and the aspirations and the good intentions, really, that everybody went into that with, hoping they could bring a lot of good things to the Afghan people, and then it just fell apart so quickly. Lessons learned, you know, one of the lessons we really haven't learned, and it's whether it's Afghanistan or Libya or Vietnam or Iraq. I mean, when we go into a country as part, whether it's a NATO operation or a coalition of the willing or whatever it might be, but American forces are put in, what you do after the combat ends is difficult. Just walking away from it, is that what you do? Well, that was Libya. Do you say, no, we're going to be in here as long as it takes to build a new society like Afghanistan? Does that work? Do you turn it over to an Iraqi government that you've stripped of a lot of people, and they have their own internal dynamics that are causing the nation to fall apart, and then you have an outside country like Iran get involved in that? And there's this hubris and a can-do attitude that goes in there, that there's a lot of ignorance that goes in with it, that we don't understand enough of the dynamics of Somalia or Iraq or Afghanistan, because a lot of times these things happen quickly. Suddenly, it's nothing we planned for. It's nothing that we have become smart about, but we're thrust into it because of an event. So there's a lot of things that administrations think about in terms of whether we get involved in something or not. I don't think that's the way the Trump administration thinks.
Can we make the assumption anymore that if there is a future war, America will be on the right side of it?
You can never assume anything. When I was at NATO, I told the allies in committee meetings and all the work I had to do with them, I said, we will always be here no matter what. And I meant it, and it was true then. But being older and wiser now, there's nothing you can assume will never happen. And so because you can't always assume that the U.S. is always going to be there. And so we now, I think, whether you're a European or you're in Asia, whatever, you can't outsource your defense and security to someone else and always be sure that that outsourcing is going to come through for you. And I hate saying that.
So an interesting pause there from former top defense official Jim Townsend on whether America will be on the right side of future conflicts. There was also no firm sense from him that Donald Trump's doctrine is making America stronger or safer. And I want to discuss that and more with our panel. I'm joined now by two people who know Washington's wars and its politics inside and out. Laurie Watkins is a former Obama policy advisor on foreign affairs and national security. And Douglas Ollivant is a former director for Iraq on the National Security Council under Presidents Obama and Bush, and he's now a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Thanks both for joining us. Doug, let me start with you. So this use of the National Guard, it's undoubtedly a show of strength, but is it substantive? Because when we went out speaking to people, there were very few who said, oh, thank goodness they're here.
Well, I think those who are in the crime areas are grateful that they're here. Look, it's a show of force. This is like essentially Washington, D.C.'s own little guardian angel, so to speak. It's showing that there are forces out there that are preventing random crime. We don't have the 4x4s going through the mall anymore in a way that had been somewhat epidemic before that. Crime is down. And there are precedents for this. I deployed to Joint Task Force Los Angeles in 1992 when we sent U.S. forces, National Guard, and others into Los Angeles in the wake of the Rodney King riots. This is not that new. This is something we've seen before, and so long as this is not a permanent condition, this is just fine. Although I would note that I've seen National Guards in Penn Station when I board the Acela for decades now.
Laurie, I'm interested in your take on that notion of this being a guardian angel for DC, but also I'm interested in this notion that, a lot of people we spoke to say, well, actually, we don't need it because it's safe here in Washington, DC. But not everyone can say that. There are those neighborhoods where people do feel unsafe on a daily basis. So should this be redirected and rethought to actually support and work with those communities if this is really about bringing crime down?
Where most of the crime is in Washington, D.C. is Wards 7 and 8. And that is not where the National Guard has been posted up. They've been posted up in show-stopping areas, even near, media outlets, and headquarter buildings over by Union Station for photo ops, etc. When tourists were coming in, it was down. Last week, you couldn't even see people walking on the streets, which around this time of year, you would never see that small amount of people. These sidewalks are usually flooded with people going to museums, enjoying themselves, bringing their families, and they have been scared off by what they've seen on the news. And this isn't liberal media blasting out an not true message. This is what's happening here. But I think it's been enough time, 2 to 3 weeks, that the media has been reporting about it enough, and Donald Trump has been coming out with even more bold statements saying, DC is the first, LA is the first, DC is the second. We're going to keep moving through the United States of America and bringing this kind of situation that you see on your television screens and on your phones. We're going to bring that to a city near you. And that really scares people. They don't like that. Why aren't they going to the streets of Baton Rouge or Shreveport, Louisiana, where Senator Kennedy and House Speaker Mike Johnson, where they're from, where they know that they could use some tightening of screws with their law enforcement department? Where is the investment there?
Okay, so Doug, is this just performative, political theatre? Why aren't they focusing on these areas that we all know, that we're all aware of, where people do suffer as a result of crime on a daily basis?
Look, I think he's starting with the places that people know about. Look, can any of your viewers in Turkey find Shreveport on a map? No, they know where Los Angeles is. They know where Washington, D.C. is. To be fair, I'm not sure very many Americans can find Shreveport on a map. He's focusing on the important cities, the large cities the cities that do have a reputation for being dangerous. Now, is reputation and reality always the same thing? No, it's not. But let's go after the places that American citizens are frightened of. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles. President Trump realizes these places are
Is that
threat.
true? Are we
Terribly
really, does
frightened.
that sort of conjure fear when we mention these cities in most people?
Is there crime? Absolutely. Could you get mugged? Were the carjackings #1 in Ward 7 and 8? Absolutely. I am not sitting here saying that there could not be improvements, but it doesn't come at the expense of militarizing the city streets to where you are ripping people out of their HVAC working vans on their way to work, where you are arresting and plucking off by racial profiling delivery people that are to all of these restaurants here in the city just because the person looks like they are Hispanic, going into traditionally Hispanic neighborhoods in Northwest DC, again, not in Ward 7 or 8, which statistically have the highest crime rates.
Okay, our conversation is being dominated. It's about the US military. It's being dominated by a domestic perspective. Does that say a lot, Doug, in terms of where Donald Trump's priorities lie for the US military? What does this inward-facing perspective that he has, what does that say to the rest of the world about the US military?
No, I don't think that President Trump's perspective for the military is domestic. This is a very small
right
number.
now it is, because he's deploying
It's such a small
troops
number
across
of
US
troops we're
cities.
talking about. This is fewer troops than we have on the Korean Peninsula. This is fewer troops than there are in Italy. This is
But he
a
wants
very
more.
small number of troops that are being put into a few cities. Is it dominating the headlines? Absolutely. But I'm guessing that there's fewer. I haven't looked at the numbers. Certainly
He's even
fewer than
enacting the War
5,000.
Powers Act saying that there's a direct threat on the United States, right? About the southern border? That's, I think, what you're referencing, right?
So, yeah, well,
So what is the threat then if it's not domestic? If he's saying there's a threat on the homeland, that's how he's able to enact these executive orders about closing down the border, being able to deploy the National Guard to cities like LA and now Washington, D.C. If not domestically, then what is? Because that's
let's
the
look globally, though.
policy he's enacting.
There are huge global challenges right now: Israel, Ukraine, crises that are bubbling up in hotspots across the world. By looking so much at what's happening domestically here, is Donald Trump capable of meeting this moment globally when it comes to the role of the US military?
Look, President Trump's absolutely capable of meeting this moment globally. He's focused on first things first: protecting the border, sealing the border, stopping the invasion of illegal immigrants that occurred under the Biden administration was his first priority. That said, he's now spending most of his time doing peacekeeping around the world. Don't say he's like laser focused on, National Guard deployments. I think this is one of the things his administration is doing, but President Trump's main focus is elsewhere.
We've seen a recent show of military strength from China, of course. What's happening with the global order militarily with Donald Trump? He has this America First strategy. Are things changing?
Well, a fear that I have as a person who worked in policy at the Pentagon in the Office of Readiness is our readiness. Are we the most ready military force that the world has known us to be? Are we ready at the drop of a dime to respond, whether that's for our own national security or at the drop of a dime for any of our allies? And Donald Trump has, even as it pertains to Russia and Ukraine, the talk about peacekeeping and whether that is going to mean or security conditions that are going to be put into place, actual ones, not just talking, actual pen to paper, and what that looks like, and if that's going to mean boots on the ground by U.S. Servicemen and women. But does that mean that we are ready if our National Guard is out on these kinds of missions where they are picking up trash, where they are doing sanitarian type work, peacekeeping you want to call out in front of federal buildings, being stationed out in front of tourist sites, etc. That is not the best use of our taxpayer dollars, because it's 3 times more money to be paying them to be doing those things than sanitation workers. And that's not what they're trained to do. And that takes away from the readiness. And yeah, that puts us in a much weaker position as far as our own national security and as far as how we can help and stand up to our allies.
Doug, is the US military ready under Donald Trump for global conflict that may arise?
Well, the short answer is yes, but let me give you some nuance here. When we talk about readiness, you have to ask, ready for what precisely? Let me see, 2005, I helped deploy helicopters and troops from Fort Hood to go to support the Hurricane Katrina relief in New Orleans. Those troops were fresh back from Iraq, and there were concerns of, oh, are we like sending these people for something they're not ready? And I was like, no, look, no one's going to shoot at them there. This is actually a good unit building exercise. We'll have squad leaders getting to know their troops. We'll have company commanders getting used to doing command and control. This can be a positive exercise to increase readiness. I suspect for the Washington, D.C. Guard, that's exactly the case. Look, the Washington, D.C. Guard is not the unit that's going to be put on a C-130 to fly somewhere if there's an invasion or a military necessity tomorrow. They're way, way down in the list of troops that we're going to deploy to a major contingency. So for the D.C. Guard, this can be great. This is a chance for their squad leaders to get to know their soldiers, to spend time. Yeah, it's not glamorous. They're not doing anything, but they are getting to know each other. They're spending time, and this can be a way they are building a version of readiness that they can build from.
So lots more to say, but we'll have to stop there, unfortunately. We're out of time. Thank you both for your insights. Great conversation. So the role of the US military will continue to be a huge talking point throughout Donald Trump's presidency. We'll be keeping track of it. Do join us next time on Inside America.